Thank you very much, David. That was a more than generous introduction. Some people, when they're going to launch their book, some authors will pick the most famous, the most important person they know. I went with David Held instead, because David is not only the most important, the most famous person I know, but he's also been a most generous and most supportive supervisor, and frankly, the most supportive supervisor I could possibly imagine in tandem with Henrietta Moore. And I will forever be grateful for that, and I really appreciate it. I'm also very grateful for the support of Carolyn Armstrong, who's helped me here today, my publisher, also Michael Dwyer in the back, and certainly the Eiko Thielemann and the Migration Studies Unit, which is co-sponsoring this event with LSE Global Governance. Thank you very much. And thank you in particular to all of you who actually were kind enough to spend your Wednesday evening, at least the early part of it, with us. I know exactly how much there is going on a Wednesday night in London, and I am absolutely flattered that you would actually take that time because you're interested in my work and my ideas. So thank you very, very much. I came to this subject matter in the immediate aftermath of the 7/7 attacks. And of course, this took place at a really sensitive time in world politics, and it remains sensitive as we solemnly observe it today on this 5th anniversary of 7/7. And having visited Tavistock Square, the site of the bus bombing this morning, the wounds are still very much open and still healing. And so, indeed, as David mentioned, it is a sensitive topic. I arrived in London a few months afterwards, and fresh, still very much from the memory of the attacks in the United States on September 11th of 2001. And I was surprised about how different the circumstances are when the perpetrators of these attacks, when the attackers are actually members of the society in which they are rebelling against, and how much that changes things. And in the UK, it wasn't the borders that were being scrutinized. It was actually the people inside those borders that were being scrutinized, and this was quite a change for me. Now, I had sort of been used to it because I went to state schools in Los Angeles, and we had metal detectors, and we had drug-sniffing dogs. But this was a bit different. And what was more fascinating and yet also troubling for me was the nature of social and political relations that I was observing and witnessing here in the UK. Particularly political relations between British natives, British-born people who their families had roots in the United Kingdom, and migrant-origin British Muslims, who equally were putting down roots in this country, and becoming a growing and a significant minority here. It is this social division and the residual political division that most perplexes me and it concerns me. And I think that's what motivated my interest in the subject matter. Democracy's strength is based on liberty, based on equality, based on political communication, active dialogue. But insecurity seems to inspire policy decisions that limit civil freedoms. Fear can cripple our capacity to interact with one another on equal terms. And of course, distrust can prohibit our capacity to interact and have dialogue with one another. So in light of this, I believe that the greatest threat is not necessarily terrorist attacks themselves, but often the decisions that we, not terrorists, make in the aftermath of such attacks. The threat is rarely the attack itself. It's how we react to it and how we govern our society in its aftermath. So this study is different. It digs to understand the nature of the political sphere in two of Europe's most interesting case studies, to me at least. The Bangladeshi community in London's East End, and indeed the Moroccan community in the Lavapiés district in southern barrios of Madrid. And the methods required to access this candid beliefs and perspectives of young European Muslims really suited me, I think, because of my background in journalism. It was a brief background, but it's very impactful and influential to me. As many of you know, I'm a reformed newspaper reporter, very reformed, who still gets the urge to throw on a hoodie and go outside and leave campus occasionally, heaven forbid. And so this research project was really a wonderful opportunity to get out there and interact with a most fascinating group of people who I thought were quite misunderstood. I'm often asked about how difficult it was to approach this subject matter as a quote-unquote outsider. But I really believe that actually it was an advantage for me. I think that we as humans are able to open up to people often who are strangers much more easily than we are able to open up to people who are part of our own community because of the social and relationship judgment that comes as a result of that. And so I really remain very grateful to my interviewees and respondents who were so open about their lives and open about their thoughts and ideas. Now, that said, of course, in Madrid, the cops didn't think I was an outsider. They thought that I was an insider. I remember I was once pulled aside in a drug-dealing sting. That was not quite so outsider of me. And, of course, and they're also looking for migrant papers, migration documents. And, of course, I had my California driver's license, and I had a notebook that demonstrated while I was doing research. It's not as easily for the young men and women who are getting profiled by these police officers every day. It questions your sense of belonging sometimes. And this is a different way of looking at things as well, is from the perspective of these young people. We seem to think of the magic word of radicalization and fundamentalism, which don't necessarily have to be Islamic in nature, by the way. We seem to think of this as a sort of brainwashing. We seem to think of it as indoctrination assumes a sort of stable subject that's really an empty vessel, a receptacle of information that they simply accept without any real persuasion or previous ideas. And where this study departs is that it actually treats human agents as human agents with their own perceptions, with their own ideas, with their own histories and biases and stories and families, and a unique set of perspectives that makes them amenable to certain ideas but not others. So, indeed, at the very source of every political movement, every trend, I think, are many individuals who make individual choices at the most local and personal of levels. And what a privilege it has been to actually be able to learn more about so many individuals. I think of a young 20-year-old from Whitechapel who is a devout congregant at the East London Mosque, and how British he felt. And he just chest-thumping British. Was an interesting chap because what he was emphasizing was just how Spanish he was, even though he was recognized, certainly from a third-party perspective, as Moroccan. He was a Marroquí. If he walks around Madrid, everyone thinks of him as a Moroccan. But he insisted that he was Spanish, and because of this insistence, he said that he actually loses out sometimes in his social relations with his fellow Moroccan friends who said, "Oh, you're so Spanish," but yet his Spanish friends said, "Oh, you're so Moroccan." And he felt very much lost and trapped in the middle of identity politics. So really, there's so many countless stories of these, actually, and of course you can read them more in the book. But by considering these perceptions, I think that the conclusions of the book become very important, and they give them life. And I think the most important one, of course, is that the principal role that I see being played by people's expectations of their political system and society, and their perceptions of how closely their political system meets those expectations. Those whose expectations and attainment who match are obviously going to be more engaged. They seem more satisfied with their political systems, and they have expectations that are met by their perceptions of attainment. Those with a larger gap are the ones that I find that rebel more. Now, this could certainly be tested further, and I hope to do so later, but that's one of the initial key findings of this study that I want to seek out more in the future. What we can take away from this, though, is quite counterintuitive. It means that those who are the most alienated tend to have also been quite integrated in the first place. Indeed, you have to know the system that you're critiquing before you can be disappointed by it. Sometimes we have to love before we can hate. And that's one of the key findings here, and there are certainly many more, and I'm not going to go on any further. I'll let you read the book without giving away the whole plot. I think that the policy implications are significant. The conceptual ideas are different, and I'm humbled that you're interested enough to come here and find out more. So thank you so much for coming.